What if I told you that a killer once lived with 6 dead bodies for 3 whole days, calmly eating their food and feeding their animals, while the victims lay lifeless just steps away? Welcome to Sherlock Mode. Picture this. The year is 1922, and deep in the peaceful countryside of Bavaria, Germany, sits a small farm called Hinterkaifeck. The name means behind Kaifeck, because this lonely place was tucked away behind the tiny village, surrounded by thick, dark woods. It was the kind of place where you could scream, and no one would hear you. The Gruber family had lived here for years. Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old farmer with weathered hands and a stern face. His wife Kazilia, 72 years old, who kept the house running. Their daughter Victoria, a 35-year-old widow with 2 small children. Little Kazilia, just 7 years old with bright, curious eyes, and baby Joseph, only 2 years old. They also had a maid named Maria Baumgartner, 44 years old, who helped with the daily work. Life at Hinterkaifeck was simple and quiet. The family worked hard, tended their animals, and kept to themselves. The closest neighbors were far away, and visitors were rare. But in the months before that terrible March night, something strange began to happen. It started with sounds. Strange, unexplained noises coming from the attic above their heads. The family's maid at the time heard them first. Footsteps when no one should be walking. Creaking boards when everyone was accounted for downstairs. The sounds were so unsettling that the maid quit her job and left the farm, telling people she believed the house was haunted. Andreas Gruber tried to calm his family's fears. Maybe it was just the old house settling, he said. Maybe it was animals in the roof. But deep down, he was worried too. Then, in March 1922, he found something that made his blood run cold. Footprints in the snow. Footprints that led from the forest to his house, but no footprints leading away. Someone had come to his farm and never left. Or at least, they were still hiding somewhere nearby. Andreas searched everywhere but found nothing. The footprints remained a mystery. A few days later, Andreas made another disturbing discovery. Someone had been tampering with the lock on his tool shed. Tools had been moved around. A house key had gone missing. It was as if someone was preparing for something. But what? The family hired a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, to replace the one who had fled. Maria arrived on March 31st, 1922. She would work for exactly 1 day before her life was cut short. Because that very evening, as darkness fell over the isolated farm, pure evil came calling. What happened next was so brutal and methodical that it would become one of Germany's most terrifying unsolved mysteries. Someone, or perhaps more than one person, crept through the darkness toward the Hinterkaifeck farm. They moved like shadows, silent and deadly. The killer was patient. They watched. They waited. And when the moment was right, they struck with devastating precision. Using a mattock, a heavy farming tool like a pickaxe, they began their gruesome work. One by one, the family members were lured to the barn. Perhaps they heard a noise and went to investigate. Perhaps the killer called for help. But whatever the reason, 4 of them ended up in that barn, where they met their fate. Andreas, Kazilia, Victoria, and little 7-year-old Kazilia were all struck down with the mattock. The killer was not finished. They returned to the house, where they found Maria, the new maid, probably hiding in fear. She was killed in her bedroom. But the most heartbreaking discovery was yet to come. Little Joseph, just 2 years old, was found dead in his crib. This innocent baby, who could not have posed any threat to anyone, had also been murdered. The killer had shown no mercy, not even for a child who could barely walk. But here's where this case becomes truly chilling. After committing these horrible murders, the killer did not flee. Instead, they made themselves at home. For 3 whole days, they lived in the house with the 6 dead bodies. They ate food from the family's kitchen. They fed the farm animals so they wouldn't make noise or die. They even lit fires in the fireplace to stay warm. Neighbors later said they saw smoke coming from the chimney and assumed everything was normal. During those 3 days, a mechanic even visited the farm to fix a broken machine. When no one answered his calls, he let himself into the workshop and completed his repair job. He assumed the family was working in the fields. He had no idea he was just yards away from 6 corpses. Finally, on April 4th, people began to worry. Little Kazilia hadn't been to school for several days. The family had missed church on Sunday. A neighbor named Lorenz Schlittenbauer decided to check on them. What Lorenz found in that barn would haunt him forever. For bodies, stacked like lumber and covered with hay, and a barn door. The sight was so horrible that grown men wept. The peaceful farm had become a scene from a nightmare. The police arrived quickly. Inspector George Gruber led the investigation with his team. They found Maria's body in the house and little Joseph in his crib. The murder weapon, the bloody mattock, was discovered hidden in the hay loft above the barn. The investigators were experienced, but this case puzzled them completely. How could someone live with dead bodies for 3 days? Who could be so cold-blooded? And most importantly, who had done this terrible thing? The police interviewed over 100 people. They followed every lead, no matter how small. But the more they learned about the Gruber family, the more complicated the case became. You see, the Grubers had secrets. Andreas and his daughter Victoria had been convicted of incest years earlier. Some people whispered that Andreas might be the father of little Joseph, his own grandson. This dark family secret had made them outcasts in their community. Then there was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the man who found the bodies. He had been having an affair with Victoria. Some people suspected he might be Joseph's real father. Was he involved in the murders? Did he kill the family to keep his secret safe? Another theory focused on Victoria's dead husband, Carl Gabriel. He had died in World War I. But what if he had actually deserted and come home secretly? What if he discovered his wife's affair and his family's dark secrets? Some investigators even looked at a traveling serial killer who was active in Germany at the time. This man had killed other families in similar ways. Could he have stopped at Hinterkaifeck during his deadly journey? The police also investigated local people who might have had grudges against the family. The Grubers were known to be unfriendly and suspicious of outsiders. They kept to themselves and trusted no one. Had they made enemies? But every lead led nowhere. Every suspect had an alibi or lacked clear motive. The case grew cold as months turned to years. The farm itself was demolished less than a year after the murders, as if erasing the building could erase the horror. Today, more than 100 years later, the case remains unsolved. A small monument marks the spot where the farm once stood. Investigators and amateur detectives still study the evidence, hoping to finally solve this brutal mystery. The police files contain thousands of pages of testimony, evidence, and theories. Some documents were lost or destroyed over the years, but many still exist in German archives, waiting for someone to find the missing piece of the puzzle. Let us analyze this mystery like Sherlock Holmes would. First, we must consider the evidence. The killer knew the farm well enough to hide there for days. They knew how to care for animals. They were strong enough to kill 6 people with a heavy tool. The killer was also incredibly bold and cold-blooded. Living with corpses for 3 days shows a level of mental detachment that few people possess. This suggests either complete madness or professional experience with death. The fact that they lured victims to the barn one by one shows planning and patience. This was not a crime of passion, but a carefully executed plan. The killer wanted all witnesses eliminated. Who could this killer be? My analysis points to 3 main possibilities. First, Lorenz Schlittenbauer had motive, opportunity, and knowledge of the family. His affair with Victoria and discovery of the bodies makes him highly suspicious. Second, Carl Gabriel, if he survived the war and returned secretly, would have been devastated by his family's betrayal. A soldier trained in killing might have the skills and coldness needed for such murders. Third, an unknown wandering killer fits the evidence of someone comfortable with death and capable of living with corpses. Such a person would have no local connections to trace. The clues that could have solved this case were probably destroyed when the farm was demolished. Additional evidence found during demolition included a blood-covered mattock in the attic and a penknife in the hay, but these came too late to help. If I were investigating this case today, I would focus on DNA analysis of any remaining evidence, computer modeling of the crime timeline, and psychological profiling of the killer's behavior patterns. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of history's most chilling unsolved crimes. 6 innocent people died brutally, and their killer walked free, taking the truth to their grave. In the quiet Bavarian countryside, their memory lives on, waiting for justice that may never come. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, like and subscribe to Sherlock Mode.